Simple syrup. Complicated syrup. Simple syrup, a topic that we actually haven't covered yet on Coffee Cocktails, even the previous private episodes. But there's so much in the world of saccharology that it's worth an episode entirely on its own. Now, first question, why syrup? If we had something that we wanted to sweeten, say, a cold drink, then we could easily just take some sugar and put that in the drink, right? Stick a little bit of sugar, put that in our drink. Oh, and the sugar's not dissolving. Okay, well, let's stir it up. And the sugar's still not dissolving. It has gone right to the bottom of this liquid. It has precipitated out of the liquid instead of dissolving. So that's not going to work. What we need to do is we need to make a solution of water and sugar to get it to mix easily with all kinds of liquids. So to do that, we take a bowl. And for simple syrup, we add equal parts of sugar and water. Easy. I'm just using these little 2-ounce scoops. You can use any amount that you want. 2-ounce sugar, 2-ounce water. And we pour them together. Oh, that did the same thing. Well, maybe if we mix it up, oh no, it's still the same thing here. So what we have here is we have a solvent, water, and we have a solute, which is the sugar in this case, but they're not becoming a homogenized solution together. It is just sugar and water separately instead of sugar and water together. So the way that we increase the solubility and make it so that this is one syrup is that we heat it up. Heating this water will make it a more effective solvent for this sugar. And I'm not going to bother doing that because I've already done that. This is simple syrup right here. The interesting thing about this is that when you cool this down, it's still going to remain in solution. We're only adding 1-to-1 sugar to water, and you can add way more than that. And you cool it down, you'll see that the solute, the sugar, starts to precipitate out, and you'll have a bunch of sugar at the bottom here. However, we're not using that much, so this is perfect. So for our drink then, we could just add this into the drink and mix it up, and it'd be way easier to work with. It'll dissolve perfectly because it's already dissolved. And I actually like to use simple syrup in a lot of things. Coffees, sure, cocktails, even when I'm cooking. Sometimes even something like a stew will appreciate just a little bit of sweetness, and simple syrup is often at hand and pretty easy to do on its own. So there are variants, though, on syrups. So the first variation is that instead of using sugar as our precipitate, we can use something else. Something as simple as brown sugar. That's pretty easy. You would just take, 1 part brown sugar and the same amount water, and then you would mix that together in a bowl, heat it up on the stove or even in the microwave, and you would have brown sugar syrup pretty easily. If you did that with Demerara sugar, you would have Demerara syrup. Another easy swap in the dissolution category is that we could very easily change the ratio. Instead of making a simple syrup, which in my nomenclature is 1 part sugar to 1 part water, we could use 2 parts sugar to 1 part water. And that's what most people would call a rich syrup. And if you were to say use brown sugar, that would be a rich brown sugar syrup. Greg from How to Drink brings up an interesting point about rich syrup. He said that in cocktail recipes that are 100 years old, they often refer to simple syrup, but his hypothesis is they mean rich syrup. That was the only kind they had back then because simple syrup needs to be refrigerated 1-to-1. Rich syrup has enough sugar in it to prevent bacteria from growing in it at room temperature. Now, everything I'm going to make here will be required to be refrigerated because I do have a refrigerator, so we'll do that. Our next category of syrup is ones that, instead of replacing the solute entirely, we will add another solute to it. To start, we'll take our bowl, and we'll take 1 part sugar. That's our first solute and our main one. We'll take 1 part water. This is still our solvent. And we're going to add an additional solute, an additional thing that we want to try to dissolve and extract out. In this case, ginger. This is just a knob of ginger that I've chopped up real fine. We're going to add about a tablespoon. The amount when you're making a dissolution syrup can vary quite a bit. It's however much you want and how strong the thing you're trying to dissolve is. So we are going to heat this on the stove, which will dissolve the sugar into the water. But also many of the flavors and compounds and aromas of the ginger will also dissolve into the water. Obviously the whole ginger won't. We're not going to get this ginger to melt entirely into just some sugar water, but the stuff that we care about will dissolve into the syrup, and that means that wonderful ginger flavor will be there too. And you can really do this method with anything. To be contrarian, I'm going to make carrot syrup to prove that you can do it. I've got some carrots here. I'm going to add 1 part water and 1 part sugar. And we're going to go ahead and heat both these on the stove. We're going to turn both these on high and just let them boil. As we can see, even before we've hit a boiling point, the sugar has dissolved with just a little swirling. We don't really need to take it all the way to a complete boil, but it doesn't hurt. Now that our syrups are boiling, we can turn them down to low heat. So we've dissolved all the sugar, but there are many more flavors in the ginger, and I don't know, probably this carrot crap too, that still need to be extracted out into the water for 2 reasons. 1, they're different compounds, they're not as easily dissolvable as sugar, and 2, with something chunky like ginger, the water can't get into the piece of actual food without time and osmosis. So it takes a little time to extract. So we're gonna go ahead and give this about 10 minutes or so on low, and yeah, we'll let it chill. Or the opposite of that, I guess. Time has passed, so we're going to strain our syrups, or I don't know, not, whatever. And let's taste. Ginger syrup. Good. Got that little peppery bite of ginger in there, but the sweetness really tames that. Ooh, that's excellent. Next up, carrot syrup. That's more orange than I thought it'd be. Now, that's not terrible. It's okay, and that frankly frightens me, but we'll just set these aside for now. The point is, you can infuse anything you want into syrup. The next syrup category is one that I'm going to call fruit syrups. We'll take the idea of solute and solvent and kind of combine it together, because something like a raspberry is going to have both. You're going to have water and sugar and raspberry gunk in here. We still will need to add a little bit of sugar and a little bit of water to this, but then you can have a really, really nice fruit syrup. This is some blueberry syrup, very delicious. So this one's pretty simple. It depends on the fruit though. So this one, we're only going to add about, let's say, 2 tablespoons of sugar. And this probably only needs, I don't know, about the same amount of water. Same as the other syrup, we could go ahead and put this on the stove and mash it up, or we could put this in a blender or mash it up with a potato masher, or we could do that after we cook it. Kind of doesn't matter. To a pot on the stove, we will add our fruit, sugar, and water. Put that on high-ish heat and let it cook. And mash it up as you wish. It's a bit easier to mash it once it's cooked a little bit, since it will be softer. Something important to note about fruit syrups is that as you cook fruit, it will change in flavor. That might not necessarily be a bad thing, but if you want that bright, tart, acidic flavor, you don't want to cook it too long. We'll let this come to a boil and then let it simmer on low-ish heat for, I don't know, 5-10 minutes. Once it comes to a boil, put it on low heat, and then make like Elsa and let it go. Mina, I know you'll appreciate that joke. After blending or mashing to taste, take your raspberry pulp and strain it off into the syrup container of your choice. I hate raspberry seeds, so I'm gonna give this a pretty good strain. I don't have any cool or clever tips for this. This just sucks. This takes a while. Actually, I do have a cool tip. So with fruit syrups, they usually appreciate a little bit of citrus. If you got a squeeze of lemon juice in there, that's gonna really help some of these a lot. And afterwards, you might need to adjust the sugar and the water, even if you're not using lemon, because you might want a thicker syrup or a sweeter syrup or however you like it. That's the great thing about syrups. It's just a template that can be changed however you like. Now, I know for a fact that you don't want syrup. It's not your thing. I don't have any fat, I don't have any beef for you here. It's not yours. All right, let's taste the raspberry syrup. Ooh, that is wonderful. That is just crisp and tart and excellent. One of my favorite things to do with fruit syrups is just get a glass of ice, some cold soda water, and just put a little splash of that syrup in the glass. Now, excuse me, just add some soda water, fruit soda. Oh, delicious. Other things I would put in the fruit syrup category are things like agave syrup and somewhere around here, date syrup. The penultimate category of syrup that I have today is something I'm going to be calling a convenience syrup. It is a solution, it is useful, and that's kind of the only reason we make them is because they're useful. The best example of that is honey syrup. Honey's difficult to use and pour, and you can't stir it into a cold drink, it just takes some time. So what you can do is you can make honey syrup. It's pretty easy. You just add equal amounts honey. Even with a squeeze bottle, you can see that this takes some time. And water. And you don't even need to heat this, just shake it up. And you have honey syrup. This is so much easier to use in a drink and pour. My favorite thing to do, take one of these pour spouts, and then you can just pour that out pretty easily. Look how much easier that is compared to having to use the squeeze bottle. Oh, and one of my other favorite things to do with convenience syrup is sweetened condensed milk. Again, just 1-to-1 sweetened condensed milk and water, and it's just way easier to use. I put this in drinks all the time. I put this in coffee because you know how difficult it is to work with a can of sweetened condensed milk, and then you gotta like put it into another container when you're done anyway, so this is just the way to go. Now, the last category of syrups is also not that difficult. It's pretty simple. We have syrups where we replace the solvent entirely. And we'll start with something not too difficult. One of my favorite things to have around is canned pineapple juice, especially in these little pony cans. We're going to do our standard syrup recipe with that. We're gonna do, oh, you think this is cat food. Yes, I do suppose that sounded like a can of cat food, but no, that's a can of pineapple juice. We're gonna do 1 part pineapple juice, 1 part sugar, let's actually see if we can get away with shaking this. We might need to heat this, but let's see. Yeah, I'll heat this. Since this is in glass, I'll just put this in the microwave for a little bit. What are you doing? No, that's for the next scene. That's Chekhov's butter, LeBron. You can't be doing that. Make sure, as with other fruit juices, you don't heat them up too much because it will change the flavor, but that might be what you're looking for. Get out of there. There we go. We have a nice, lovely pineapple syrup. So we're still using sugar, but we've entirely replaced the solvent with something else. Ooh, that's good. That's really good. Save that for later. Now, the next evolution of replacing our solvent entirely is to use something, not just pineapple juice, but something other than water entirely. We're going to use rum, which not only has water in it, it also has ethyl alcohol. For our initial step, we won't be going too far with that. We'll still be using sugar. 1 part sugar. 1 part rum. I generally prefer a darker rum with this, but a light rum will do. This Miami Club has wonderful vanilla notes to it. And hey, that's another tip. With citrus in the fruit syrups, that's great, but with everything else, including the fruit ones, if you just put a little bit of vanilla extract in your syrup, it just tastes a bit better without ever tasting too vanilla-y. And for that, you can really even just use artificial vanilla flavor. It's not a main part of the dish, so I've tried it. It works just the same. You can't tell the difference. So we're going to take this and we're going to put it on the stove. An interesting thing will happen though. Sugar dissolves pretty easily. We won't need to get this too hot to dissolve the sugar. However, the ethyl alcohol in this will turn to a gas and start boiling at around 73 degrees Celsius. And then, if we keep heating it, the water will turn to a gas and start boiling at 100 Celsius. So this liquid right here will start still, start to bubble, stop bubbling, and start bubbling again. And if we heat it completely dry, that runs a fire hazard, but then it would stop boiling again until we melted the sugar, in which case we have big problems. So let's see what that looks like. Here we can see the pot has already started to boil. That's the ethyl alcohol boiling off at 73 degrees Celsius. And I don't recommend doing this, but if you dunk your head right on top of it, you can smell that that's alcohol. Boiling quite fiercely. I'm going to turn it down a little bit. And you can boil this for as long as you want. If you just want to dissolve the sugar and leave the alcohol in, you can do that. And don't light this on fire. Don't do a dumb. This is alcohol vapor. It absolutely is flammable. And now we can see the bubbling is starting again as the water starts to boil. So I don't want to boil too much of the water, so I'm going to turn this off and let it cool. Now we have rum syrup. Ooh, and that is great. It's still got rum flavor in it. But at this point, it contains, because I boiled it all the way off the first time and a little bit the second time, this contains no alcohol. Well, it contains a very, very small amount of alcohol, a fraction of a percent. Now, note that there is still some. So if that's something you have an aversion to, then this is not an alcohol-free syrup. There's so little, though, I would be fine with giving this to my 4-year-old niece. But we can use what we've learned to continue our syrupy journey. So We know that water and sugar are excellent solutes and solvents, but we can do a little bit better here. This entire time, I have kept an ominous stick of butter on the counter, and now we will use it. Butter is made up of three main components. One is water, which we know a lot about now and how it dissolves things. The second is fat, which I'll give you a spoiler for the end. We won't be able to dissolve the fat using any of the materials that we have here, but it will be important. And the next thing that we have is milk solids, which will be sugars and proteins and other cow stuff. So this next step isn't that hard, and I feel like I've said that a couple times throughout the episode now, and it's been increasingly less true each time, but this one, it really isn't that hard. We're going to make browned butter for the stove. We will take our butter and put it on the stove. Try to fend off the cat that just heard that and now wants to eat butter. Who can blame them? One entire stick of butter will be good for the recipe we're about to make. Now, unlike sugar and water, as we heat this butter up, it will break apart into its constituent components. The interesting thing about butter is that it is not a solution like sugar and water syrup is. Butter is a suspension in which the fat and water are held together in tiny little droplets, and as much as it might not look like it looking at a stick of butter, they are separate, the fat and water are. And in fact, we can see that now. We see these wonderful little rivulets of oil and the milk solids coming off of that. You gotta be careful not to melt butter on too high a heat because some of the water will boil and pop before the rest of it even gets warm. So just keep an eye on it and stir it. Our goal here is that first off, we're going to get this entire mixture past 100 degrees Celsius, which is boiling the water off. I stopped to take a drink of blueberry soda. What did I miss? Oh, good, our butter is melted. All the milk solids have come to the top, but we can see underneath that we have this wonderful butter fat, most of the butter, the majority of the butter. And below that, it's hard to see, we have water. Now this is kind of where the difficult part is. The water is underneath everything, but it's gonna boil to the top. So we just gotta make sure it doesn't boil too fast and splatter this butter fat out. All this scum, this foam up top, that's the milk solids. The protein, the sugar, the good stuff. Milestone 1 is that we now have melted butter. Now, as we can see here, our butter is starting to boil. Boiling butter. Or as you cannot see here because it's covered in a layer of foam. It is starting to boil off though. After a few minutes, we should have no water in this mixture. Then what will happen is that we will continue heating this mixture. See, this protein mixture, the milk fat up top, it's great and I want to keep it. If we were to remove this, it would be called clarified butter, in which it would just be milk fat and nothing else. Because we like this milk fat so much, here's a question to ask. Why don't we add more of it? I saw a wonderful America's Test Kitchen recipe that said that you can make something called caramelized brown butter by adding more milk fat. In the case of this right here, they recommended 1 to 2 tablespoons of dry milk powder that you can get at the store. Good. We want to get that so hot that all the milk solids, the natural ones and the added ones, will toast, will brown, will caramelize. That's called brown butter, but when we add the milk powder, that's called caramelized brown butter. Same thing, but just more of the good stuff. So we'll let that cook. Brown butter, especially caramelized brown butter, is notorious for burning so easily. You think it's perfectly fine 1 minute, and then you look away for just a second, and then it's toasted black and bad, and you have to throw it away. And I don't want to let that happen. Note that even though this mixture is now hot, way hotter than it was when all the water was boiling, we're only getting a little bit of bubbling. It's because all the water's evaporated out. We will only get boiling when there's something to turn to gas, like water. I don't know if stirring this frequently will help, but it will help make sure that I don't walk away and ruin it. So it will help, is what I'm saying. We're starting to get some golden color. We're getting some real bubbles now. Whatever remaining water was left in the milk powder is starting to boil off. Ooh, we're getting gold. It's almost there. Now stirring will be helpful because we'll make sure that milk solids are not all sticking to the bottom. Oh, we're starting to get golden brown. And there it is, I'm calling it brown butter. Caramelized brown butter at that. Take it off the heat. You've earned it. Now we have caramelized brown butter. Not just brown butter, caramelized brown butter. It's delicious. You can use this in place of butter at all sorts of applications, sweet or savory. Using this stuff in chocolate chip cookies is just about the best thing. But we're going to continue down our syrup spiral and make further mistakes. So, what we are going to do is take advantage of some of the things we've learned about solutions and solvents to fat wash rum. Now, for this, we're going to use a dark rum, preferably a Demerara rum. My favorite is Hamilton 86, and not just because it's got Hamilton in the name. My liquor store never has Hamilton 86 though, so I have a very nice Puerto Rican rum instead. We're going to use both the ethanol and the water in this to dissolve flavors that are in this caramelized brown butter. Again, as with the infusion syrups that we had, I'm not going to dissolve every last bit of this. The fat's not going anywhere. Most of those milk particles are going to be around, but a lot of the flavor will be dissolved into this solution. So here's how we do it. Put our entire stick of caramelized brown butter, oh my gosh, look at that, into a wide pan. Then we're going to take an entire bottle of rum and use it to wash out the pan a bit. We're going to add that to our pan. More surface area is better. That's why we're using a pan, not just like a bottle or something. I want to get every little bit of this. I'm going to lick this when I'm not on film. There we go. Now, we're going to cover this and put it in the refrigerator for 24 hours. In that time, the ethanol and the water will both extract flavors from the butter, but different flavors. There are some flavors that, there are some things that water, despite being the universal solvent, can't extract. So the ethanol will help us out there as well. We're going to cover it to prevent any funky flavors from happening in the refrigerator. And I will have to look at this many times, but not touch it for a full day. Welcome to tomorrow. This rum has been fat washing for 24 hours now, and the butter has all congealed to the top. Some of the milk solids are still floating around there. It's normal. So let's go ahead and do this first. Let's get this wonderful butter, and let's definitely not throw this away. Just try to scoop this off into a container and save this for anything. Cookies, pancakes. As with the rest of the syrups that we've been working with, the rum syrups, make sure you cook this for long enough to evaporate nearly all the alcohol if you don't want any in there. But this is really good stuff. Hang on to it for sure. And it makes all these weird, interesting patterns, these little discs of butter that float up to the top. And now I just need to get it out of here without letting someone eat this butter behind my back and without spilling it all over and ruining my entire situation. I think I'm going to go into a big bowl. And I think I'm going to go from a big bowl to a little bowl. Then I'm going to go back into the bottle through a strainer think I might go in here first because this looks precarious. There we go. Sometimes that's how you have to do it. And all these wonderful milk solids go back in the butter. And there we have caramelized brown butter fat washed rum. Now, what are we gonna do with this? I'm glad you asked. Using our principles of rum syrup from earlier, we are going to make caramelized brown butter fat washed rum syrup, AKA complicated syrup. So we're gonna just use our same method as we have been doing. It's simple, it really is. We're gonna go with 2 parts of this rum and the same amount, 2 parts of this sugar. Heat that up just as before. I like to go till just after the first simmer and just when the second simmer is starting. And there we have it, caramelized brown butter fat washed rum syrup. This stuff is amazing. It's got a little bit of the smoky flavor of the rum. It's rich, it's got vanilla notes. It's good on everything. Oh no. Almost everything. All right, I think I'm gonna enjoy this later. But you know, we still have the rum here, which is a fantastic drink on its own. I think I'll go have a glass of this. I'm just gonna do a 2-ounce pour of this over ice. Man, this stuff is good. Now, I like to take my liquor over ice and stir it up a little bit. The water dilutes it, which actually opens up the flavors and makes it a little easier to taste the wonderful the richness here. It's fantastic. And I tend to like my rum with a little bit of sweetness, so I'm just gonna add a little bit of sugar. Oh, that just went right to the bottom. Okay, well, I'm gonna stir it up. Maybe that'll dissolve it in this cold drink. It's not dissolving.